everyone, it's Nina and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing my 23 books I want to read in 2023. It feels so wrong saying 2023 instead of 2022. I'm not fully in the new year yet. But basically this video is going to be a list of a general TBR of books I want to read over the course of the next year. I'll probably sprinkle all the books I talk about right now on other TBR lists I do throughout the year. And ideally I would be reading one or two a month to keep on track. But this isn't like a set in stone list. I will probably change my interest over the course of the year. But at the same time, I'm very interested in all the books I have on this list right now, and I'm very excited to read them. So with that intro out of the way, let's get into the video. So the first general category I'm going to be talking about is all of the Danmei novels I'm going to be reading. If you guys have watched my channel at all in 2022, you know I really got into Danmei as a genre this last year. And I want to continue reading some of the series I started in 2022, as well as start some new ones. The first series I'm going to be continuing and hopefully finishing in 2023 is the Grandmaster Demonic Cultivation by MXTX. This is the third volume here, but on my list for the 23 books, I'm particularly listing the fourth and fifth volumes. The fourth volume came out in December, and the fifth volume is coming out in May. So as soon as the fifth volume comes out, I'm going to probably binge read the fourth and fifth volume together. I've talked about this series pretty extensively on my channel. It's also very, very popular. This was the basis for the 2019 live-action adaptation, The Untamed, which is definitely one of the most popular Chinese dramas ever, especially in the Western market. I'm really excited to finish this series. I've been loving it so much so far. The fourth volume is technically the end of the story, and then the fifth volume is all of these short stories that come afterward. The next Danmei series I'm really excited to be starting in 2023 is the Golden Terrace series by Kanwu Bingbai. This is a duology that was released by the small indie publisher Peach Flower House. This is also a historical Danmei, but I think it's particularly classified as wuxia versus zhanjia, which is what all of MXTX's works are categorized under. So I think it has a military leaning versus being about cultivators. And I know this is a arranged marriage, political rivals to lovers series. I think originally the English translation for the title was Golden Stage, so if you look up things online, it might be under that over Golden Terrace. But I'm really excited to read this series. It's actually only these two volumes, which is really nice. I feel like every single Danmei I've read has been at least like 3+ volumes, so having just this kind of easy, more manageable series will be a nice change of pace. And yes, I'm very excited to check out this series. I also am excited to see what other series Peach Flower House releases in the future as well. And the last Danmei series I'm going to be talking about for this video is Husky and White Cat Shizun. This is the first volume that I read as part of my Smutathon vlog that I will link above. But the volumes I'm hoping will contribute to my 23 books will be the second, third, and fourth volume. Currently, the fourth volume has not been announced, but I'm guessing it's probably going to come out sometime in the fall time or winter this year. And this is kind of like a second chance dual timeline romance where the main character Moran is reincarnated in his younger self's body. And he's able to relive his life and kind of make changes for the better, both to try and save the people that he loved who he lost in his previous timeline, as well as get revenge on people who wronged him. And one of those people that he thinks has wronged him is his Shizun, who's Chu Wanning. But it's pretty clear that what he thinks is hate is probably a different emotion. I really enjoyed this first volume, and I'm excited to see where the series goes in the future ones as well. I think this is also a series where after the fourth volume, they become a couple pretty early on, as opposed to Grandmaster Demonic Cultivation and Scumvillain Self-Saving System from MXTX, where the couple doesn't really officially get together until the very end. So I'm excited to see them actually function as a couple, possibly earlier on in the story. So the next set of books I want to talk about are all of the ones that I currently own. Only one of these is from an author I've read from before, and the other ones are just random ones that I've picked up over the last year or two. The first one on that list is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This is a historical fiction that is about a boy who finds a book, and he ends up finding out that this book is the last one of its kind, that all of the other books by this author have been destroyed over the years, and kind of stumbles into a larger mystery involving that. I think this book has a lot of gothic themes to it as well. But I also have recently seen this book be categorized as dark academia, which is one of the things that made me go, oh, okay, I'm a little bit more interested in it now that I know that categorization has been put on it. I don't really know how heavily that dark academia theming is present in the book, but I guess I will just have to read it and find out. The next book on this list is one I'm very excited for, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This book is very popular on BookTube. A lot of people consider it probably the forefront book in the no plot, just vibes category. I'm not really sure if that's necessarily my niche, but at the same time, I'm very interested in it. This book, I believe, is kind of like a magical realism romance that follows two dueling magicians in this magical circus over a very long, extended period of time. Besides it being popular on BookTube, another thing that made me really interested in this book was that I found out that it's actually my best friend's favorite book of all time. And I found that out because I was helping him set up his bookshelves and he had two different copies of this. And then when I asked him about it, he was like, yeah, that's my favorite book ever. So having that like person in my real life vouching for this book being good, as opposed to just like the general booktube hype over it, definitely made me more interested in picking it up. I also am really, really pleased that I got this particular edition. These are the new vintage Penguin editions. I think these might only be out in the UK. I got this as well as the new cover for the Starless Sea. I'm hoping to read her two books in chronological order, so that's why this one is on this list and not the Starless Sea. But I probably will end up reading her other book this year as well. But I'm just a really big fan of this new cover design. I think it's so pretty. The next book on this list is one that I'm a little bit embarrassed I haven't read it yet because I definitely put it on a couple TBRs this last year, and that is Forest Fall by Lyndall Clipstone. This is the sequel and final part of the duology with Lake's Edge, which is one of my favorite books I've read in 2022. I can't go too much into the plot because the previous book ended on a cliffhanger, which is where this book is going to start. But overall, it's a YA fantasy monster romance. I'm really hoping to get to this as soon as possible, probably within the next month or two, because Lyndall Clipstone actually has a new series that she's going to be coming out with later on in the year, and I'd really like to finish this duology before I start her next one. So yes, this will probably be on my TBR for the rest of January, if not in February. And the last book on this list that I physically own is Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. This is basically like a textbook talking about the entire history of the Targaryen dynasty and their rule over Westeros. So my relationship with Game of Thrones is I watched the first like 4 to 5 seasons of it, but I think because I stopped it before I saw the ending, I don't have like the same bad taste in my mouth on the series as opposed to everyone that watched the last season and hated it. And this last fall, I got really, really invested in House of the Dragon. I was so invested in it that I knew I had to read the backstory book that kind of is going to be the basis for all of the future seasons of that series. Like I said, this is more of like a textbook. It's not written as a traditional narrative. It's written from the perspective of a maester who's using other primary sources from history to kind of piece together the entire history of the Targaryen dynasty. So this book and House of the Dragon are not going to have like a 1-to-1 ratio with everything being canonical in the book also happening in the series, because it's kind of implying that the House of the Dragon series is like what actually happened. And this is one where kind of like truth over time has been like diluted from different people's opinions. Also, House of the Dragon is only covering the Targaryen Civil War, which I think in this book is only like 6 or 7 chapters. But at the same time, I think those chapters have a lot of interesting like character moments in them that I'm very excited to see like happen in the TV show adaptation. And I think it's also been said that if the Dance of the Dragon storyline goes well, House of the Dragon will expand to talk about other time periods into the Targaryen history. So there's a lot of different sections in this book that will eventually come to fruition in later seasons. And I should say the main reason why I want to read this now is because House of the Dragon Season 2 is not coming out until 2024, so I kind of need to hold over my interest for the next year by reading this book instead. Okay, so those are all the books that I physically own. The next set of books are ones that either I don't own currently or have not yet come out. Some of these books are from authors I have read from before, some of these are completely new to me. But overall, all of them are ones I'm very excited to read in the new year. Probably the most like exciting book series that I have on this list is the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black. I guess the technical term for this would be the Folk of the Air series, but this encompasses the Cruel Prince, the Wicked King, and the Queen of Nothing. Overall, this is Fae Enemies to Lovers. I have heard recently this book actually does not have as much romance as you initially would go into it thinking it would have. I think it actually heavily follows much more being like about political intrigue and kind of like the war between humans and Fae. I feel like I don't know a lot about the plot, but I do know a good deal about the characters. I know the main girl's name is Jude, and apparently she's kind of like a bad bitch, and a lot of people really like her as a female lead, which I can definitely get behind. And the main male lead is Cardan. Obviously, like the title says, he's the cruel prince. He's apparently a huge asshole. And I also know that he has a tail, which apparently is something a lot of booktubers feel they need to comment on. And honestly, I love that. I can't wait to see what their relationship is like and how it develops. Another series I really love to start this year is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. To be honest, I don't know a ton about the overarching plot of this series. I just know that it's kind of like a messy lesbian lead and is kind of like a mix of fantasy and sci-fi. I think there's necromancy also involved, which I usually like in my fantasy stories. But the main reason I'm interested in this series is because it's one that I actually haven't seen talked about too much on BookTube, but it's one that a very large percentage of my friends in real life, as well as kind of like the cosplay community, is very, very attached to. I've seen a lot of art of it, as well as people cosplaying the characters. And I feel like in that way, it's the perfect bridge between my two main hobbies. It's also one that I feel like my wife said she would also be interested in reading, so it's something that we can read and hopefully get into the fandom together with. And I also feel like it's kind of like my God given right as a lesbian to read a very popular lesbian main character fantasy series like this. So I'm very excited to see what the story is like. The next book on this list is one that I have read from the author before. It actually was one of my favorite books of 2022. And that book is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I read Clara and the Sun and I really, really loved everything about that book. It was a very heart wrenching one that made me think a lot, and I think this one will be a lot of the same. I've heard that Kazuo Ishiguro kind of has two main modes that he writes in. He writes a lot of like Japanese historical fiction, and he also has two like dystopian sci-fi speculative fiction novels. And those two are Clara and the Sun and Never Let Me Go. A lot of people have said that if you like one mode, you might not necessarily like his other works that are outside of that. So I figured to kind of like ease my way through some of the other books he's written, I would read the other speculative fiction book that he read first, which is Never Let Me Go. From what I think I remember of the synopsis, this is about a world where people are born to specifically be organ donors. I don't know if it's that they're like genetically modified so they have like more than one organ so that they can continue to live on even after their organs have been harvested, or if it's like they're kind of born specifically to die for the sake of other people surviving. But I know it's a romance love triangle between three people who are part of this program. And there's also a movie adaptation that has Keira Knightley in it. I'm very excited to see what this book is like and kind of all the themes that it'll go through. And hopefully, if I enjoy it, I will also check out the movie adaptation as well. Another book that I am so excited to come out this year is Foxglove by Adeline Grace. I read Belladonna by Adeline Grace in 2022, and it was one of my favorite books I read that year. This is the sequel. I don't know if it's actually going to be a duology or going to be part of a larger series, but this one is coming out in August of 2023. And I am like beside myself. I'm so excited for this to come out. I have a lot of predictions of where I think the story is going to go and kind of like who is going to end up with who in terms of like character relationships. But I just can't wait to like jump back into this world and have a really fun time with all of the characters. The next book on this list is another one that is from an author I've read from before, and that is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. I have previously read both Vespertine and Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, and I really, really enjoyed both of those books. I've heard this one is technically her weakest of the three books that she's come out with, but it also was her debut, so that makes a lot of sense. She's probably still like developing her writing style when this first book came out. This book is also a fae story. I believe the main character is a painter who gets commissioned by a fae prince to make his portrait, but he ends up hating the portrait and then ends up taking her back to like stand trial in the fae world because of it. But of course, along the way, they're going to fall in love. I really want to read this book to kind of like complete the backlog of all of Margaret Rogerson's books that I've read, because I do think she has the potential to be probably one of my favorite fantasy writers. It just looks like a good time, and honestly, the cover design also is incredibly beautiful. Another book on this list that I want to read that has not yet come out is A Grim and Sunken Vow by Ashley Shuttleworth. This is the third book in the Hollow Star saga. I read the first book, A Dark and Hollow Star, and gave it 4 stars. Then I read A Cruel and Fated Light and gave that 4.5 stars. And hopefully the trajectory will continue, and this one will end up being a 5-star book for me. I'm really, really excited. This one does not come out until the fall time, and I'm just like, so excited to see where the story goes. This is like a modern, more urban fantasy that has fae in it. The second book also kind of ended on a cliffhanger, so I can't really go into what the plot line of the overarching story is. But the ending of the second book was so like action-packed and exciting, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen in the third book. The next 2 books on this list are continuing a series I started in 2022. Or should I say restarted, because I had read these books a very long time ago, at least like 10 years ago, back when I was still in high school. And those books are The Vampire Lestat and Queen of the Damned by Anne Rice. I read Interview with the Vampire this last year, kind of like in preparation for the TV show adaptation coming out, and I want to continue and read the next 2 books in the original trilogy. In Interview with the Vampire, the story is told from the perspective of Louis as the main character and kind of his very on and off again, very antagonistic relationship with the Vampire Lestat. But the Vampire Lestat is kind of Lestat going back and saying that is not actually what happened, and goes through his entire backstory back when he was still human and how he was transformed into a vampire, and just his entire life story. And then the Queen of the Damned jumps forward to modern times and involves the storyline of how the very first vampires were ever created, and also a big like world-ending threat that they all have to deal with. I really, really love these books, and I'm super excited to jump back into the world again. I loved The Vampire Lestat when I read it back in high school, and I'm excited to take another look at it and see like more of the details in it that I probably forgot about over the last 10 years. And I think just reading these will get me really excited for the second season of the TV show to come out. I also think once I've read these two books, I kind of will have all the foundation for me to jump off and read all these spin off books that talk about the other main characters' backstories, which I'm very excited because I own both Marius and Armand's backstory books, and I'm really, really excited to read those as well. The last two books on this list are both ones that I have not read from these authors before. One of them came out in 2022, and the other one has yet to come out. The first one of those books is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This book is like dark academia mixed with a fantasy setting. A lot of people say it's very similar to A Secret History. It takes a lot of classic tropes that were established in The Secret History, but it focuses much more on the effects of racism on academia. I think it also talks a lot about linguistics and the way that like colonialism can change language. I've heard that the characters are definitely not as, I don't know, enticing as they are in The Secret History, but there's a lot of overarching plot and messages in the book that make it definitely worthwhile. And I'm very excited to check this one out. I think it's definitely going to become a staple in the dark academia genre going forward. And this is another one I honestly wanted to check out when it first came out, and I just like lost track of time. So I'm definitely going to try and read it this year. And the last book on this list is another one that is an anticipated release for later on in the year, and that is Bitterthorn by Kat Dunn. This book I found just kind of randomly searching through Goodreads, and it sounds incredibly up my alley. It's basically a sapphic Beauty and the Beast retelling. My main interest in this book is that it seems to have what I would consider my like new favorite trope, which some would consider a little toxic, which is human girl x several thousands of years old immortal being, except this time the immortal being is a woman. One of the like foundational things that lets me know I'm a lesbian is the second a trope goes from being a guy and a girl to two girls, I'm instantly way more interested in it. And this book just sounds so good. I'm really, really excited for it when it comes out. The cover has not yet been released by the time I'm posting this video, but I really hope it's going to be good. So that is it for this video. Last year, I did not do my best in actively reading the 12 books that I had set for myself, but this year I'm really excited to read all of these books. And I definitely will update you probably like at least halfway through the year with how my progress on this TBR is going. But that's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys as always so much for watching. Please consider liking this video or subscribing if you aren't already. Please consider following me on the Storygraph if you want to see the books I'm reading in real time. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!